Hello, everyone, and welcome to the latest episode of What to Think, VentureBeat's technology news podcast. I'm here with crack VentureBeat reporter Jordan Novett. How are you doing, sir?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm good. It's good to be online with you again.
Yes.
Today's guest is Josh Elman. He's a VC at Greylock and a veteran of Facebook and Twitter and LinkedIn. So it's an interview I recorded with him a little while back, a couple weeks ago. But before we get to that, we're going to go to the news. I don't know. What should we start with, Jordan?
Let's start with Apple. They've got all these devices coming, right?
September 9th, Apple has said it's going to have an event in San Francisco. Of course, they never say what they're going to announce, but lots of people believe there will be the new iPhone 6S and the 6S Plus.
Okay.
Faster processors and force touch control and maybe a body that doesn't bend so easily if you're stupid enough to put it in your back pocket and sit down.
I feel like this is going to be the one big consumer electronics device that everyone's going to want to buy this holiday season. So it
A new
seems
iPhone?
like it's a big deal. Yeah.
Maybe. Apple's been really dominating the smartphone market lately. Samsung, obviously popular, but they just haven't had the same cachet as Apple for a long time. But the thing that I think everybody's going to be talking about next week is Apple TV.
Does that even matter?
Not very much right now, to be honest. I think it's a very minor product, and even Apple has acknowledged that for years. But they're going into their fourth generation, and lots of people think it's going to have universal search and Siri. So you'll be able to talk to Apple TV and say, "Hey Siri, when is the next episode of Game of Thrones?" Or, "Hey Siri, can you resume playing Orange is the New Black on Netflix for me?"
Okay. I guess that's kind of cool, but I think it's something that is expected now when you're in your living room. Xbox has had voice recognition for a while, right?
True. You know, it's sort of expected, but Apple has a way of spackling on some nice UI and pixie dust and excitement, so who knows? And there will probably be other things too. There might be an iPad Pro, which is an extra large iPad designed for multitasking and getting work done. We'll see. How about Google's new logo, Jordan?
Google has a new logo. I'm not used to it. It rolled out on Monday, and it is moving quickly across all of the Google entities. I was just looking at the Google Cloud Platform website today because I cover the cloud, and everything was newly rebranded. There is even a new Google Cloud Platform logo, and the fonts are different. And you know what? Designers are starting to voice their complaints about this new look. It's not well typed, they say. I don't think it matters a whole lot, but Google really did a cute job of putting an animated GIF on their homepage and showing the development or change from the existing logo to the new one. And it's kind of fun. It spruces things up. But I'm not used to all the browser tabs having this new little
Oh
G.
my God, that messes me up so much.
Right?
It's like
Same
I
with
was
me.
trying to find my calendar and it's like, oh, it's that weird little round G thing now.
Yeah, but actually Google has made its logo look a little bit different again and again and again in the past 15 years. We have a cool little article about it that shows the evolution, so we should just move on with our lives, I think.
I don't know. It looks a little childlike to me, but what do I know? And honestly, at the end of the day, I don't care. Except those browser tabs really are messing me up. I want to talk about a topic that is sort of techie, but I know is close to your heart, Jordan, and that's Hampton Creek and their eggless mayo.
Yes, it tastes so good.
So full disclosure, Jordan is a huge fan of eggless mayo.
Several bottles in my fridge, at home and at work.
But here's the thing, is the U.S. Egg Board has decided to come out against it. I guess this is sort of a joint venture between the FDA and the egg industry, right?
Well, first it was the FDA. It was a few weeks ago that the FDA ruled that Hampton Creek using the word mayonnaise is not okay. Actually, the bottles say just mayo, but that won't do for the FDA.
Oh, give me a break.
Before that even, there was a huge article in Business Insider from angry former employees who pointed out big issues with the company, including that there's a dog at the facility where they make these special ingredients.
Hampton Creek did respond to that, by the way.
They did. The Guardian yesterday had an article saying that the American Egg Board, which is a U.S. government-appointed agricultural body, tried to basically stop this company from growing as much as it has been. They think of it as a major threat to the egg industry, which brings in $5.5 billion a year. So a lot of money on the line here. And the most damning thing for me is that they tried to get it removed from the shelves at Whole Foods.
Ouch.
And that's one of many stores where it's sold. It's also sold in Safeway and other places.
This reminds me of the time that the dairy industry tried to get soy milk reclassified as soy drink. They said you can't really call it milk if it doesn't come out of a cow, which is ridiculous, and it's clearly motivated by their own economic self-interest. So I think this could actually be good for Hampton Creek, because it could be a huge PR win for them. They say, look, even the government is trying to shut us down. That's how good we are.
Whatever soy milk companies were being attacked for using the word milk, I think it's not quite the same, because those companies can band together, pool their money together, and have a sophisticated legal argument to make against the government. Here, it's one company, and they're funded by Li Ka-shing, Asia's richest man, maybe Asia's richest person. But that doesn't mean that the company has enough money to be able to fight on all of these different directions or battlegrounds. It's the FDA, it's employees who are making issues for the company to deal with. And now the American Egg Board, which I didn't even know existed, actually.
Yeah, I'd never heard of it either, but it doesn't surprise me that it exists. I think this is a blatant attempt by an incumbent industry to fend off a credible threat from an upstart new competitor that may well be better than they are. But you're right, that doesn't necessarily mean that Hampton Creek is going to win this battle. A $5.5 billion egg industry may be a formidable opponent.
Yeah, and by the way, let me just say the only reason that I write about it is that they use data to figure out which plant proteins to put in their products that taste the most like eggs or mayo, and that's kind of interesting to me.
It's kind of clever.
Other companies that make food products are looking at numbers as well. So if there's anything we're learning, we're giving it a lot of tech attention for a product that really is a food.
That's true. I'm pretty sure that Nabisco and Kellogg and General Mills all have data scientists working for them too. And that
Probably
doesn't necessarily make them tech companies. Still, an interesting story, and one that I will look forward to following.
Yes, we'll keep writing about it.
Before we go to my interview with Josh Elman from Greylock, I want to take a minute to thank our sponsor. This is part of a series of What to Think podcasts called Innovation Engines, and it's all about platforms and the people who are building them. It's brought to you by Pivotal Tracker. That's the agile tool that's been organizing software teams since 2006. Pivotal Tracker has a simple drag-and-drop interface, structured workflow, and it helps developers, product managers, and designers build and manage better software one story at a time. You can test it out by going to pivotaltracker.com and sign up for a 30-day free trial today. I'm here in Greylock's San Francisco office with Josh Elman, who's been a partner with Greylock since about 2011. Thanks for joining us on What to Think, Josh.
Thanks for having me.
You have a really interesting background at a bunch of big name companies, Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, and then before that at Real Networks. You're kind of a product guy. You're known as a growth guy, right? A growth hacker.
Yeah.
I don't know if you'd use that term, but I know you were instrumental in helping at least the social networks you were at, Facebook and Twitter, grow a lot. But I want to talk about platforms in particular today, because you worked on Facebook Connect while you were there. And we can come back to the growth thing in a little bit if you want. But I'd like to kind of hear the thinking that went into building Facebook Connect and how that's developed since it's been launched.
Yeah, it's a great question. And when we talk about startups and even building these networks, what was exciting through my whole career was how do we take these little great ideas and try to get them in the hands of as many people as possible, right? And so you think about growth, it's really just building a product and figuring out how to get it in as many hands as possible. And as Facebook was growing, I joined the Facebook in very early 2008. The Facebook platform actually launched in May of 2007. And that was
at F8, right?
At F8 in May of 2007. And I think it's important to understand the genesis of that. Facebook had been around now 3-4 years, and they had figured out that the news feed was just a fundamental concept that people were coming back to all the time. And they had built products like photos and events internally that leveraged the news feed. And that when you went to this photos experience, the photos experience was enhanced by the fact that when you shared a photo, went into your friends' news feeds, they all saw it, and then you went back into the photos experience. When you said you were going to an event, it went into the news feed, and then people went back into the deep events experience. And so they had this realization that we could never build the next 1,000 apps that we should build, whether that's Q&A or place recommendations or just whatever you could imagine that Facebook would be about music. So they said, instead of trying to even build the next 3 apps, why don't we build a platform? And so a bunch of really early, just brilliant people kind of put together that very first platform. When I joined the company in early 2008, it was already a little bit of a crossroads because the platform had done something unprecedented. For the first time kind of in internet history, you could acquire millions of users very, very, very quickly through your application by simply getting the people you did acquire, people who were your users, to share it with other people through Facebook, through invitations, through newsfeed updates, through notifications. You could just do all these things that once you had somebody, they would share it with the next person.
Which the game industry figured out really quickly, right? The Zyngas of the world.
You know, it was great. It was like Mark Pincus was leading Zynga at the time. He was very early. He said this might work for game. But at the same time, it was great for movies and sharing movies and quizzes. Joe Greenstein was running Flickster at the time, and they were just growing like gangbusters. The Partovi brothers were running iLike, and they were figuring this out for music. Slide was building apps that let you express yourself in new ways, you know, photographs and other stuff. And a lot of people had actually earned lessons from MySpace, which had been around, you know, it already was very, very big, and it figured out, if we can just get you to embed something on MySpace, somebody else would see it, they'd want to embed it too. YouTube spread that way. But Facebook's platform is unprecedented, kind of taking those lessons of the sort of accidental platform of MySpace with the embedding, and just made it formalized, structured. By the time I joined the company in early 2008, there were two things going on. One is, people were using the virality in such a way that it was almost taking over Facebook. It was almost this place where users of Facebook were saying, I go to my news feed, and instead of seeing updates from friends, I see, join me in this game, join me on this quiz, join me on this game.
Mafia Wars and, you know, like, Farmville and like...
Super Poked You. And hey, you're in my top friends, why aren't I in your top friends? And all of a sudden it was this world where actually people weren't liking Facebook as much. Because they didn't want Facebook to be this place they went where they just got hammered to go join their friends and all these other things that they weren't even sure how much their friends wanted them to join. Because the entire platform was within Facebook, we were thinking to ourselves, why aren't the big websites of today in here? Why isn't CNN social and integrated with Facebook in a way? Because news could be so much better if it was social. Why isn't Amazon figuring out how to be within Facebook so that shopping could be social? You can see what your friends like or whatever. Why isn't eBay trying to figure this out? Why isn't Netflix? And there were some rules actually around what you could share with your friends about your video, but why isn't Netflix figuring out how to share what videos you like? Why isn't Yelp here trying to figure out what reviews your friends have made, because that might make you much better to go to a restaurant. Right when I joined, we started to have those conversations and realized they were never going to build within Facebook. Even as great as we thought Facebook was, and it's a far cry from what it's really become, which is just tremendous, we didn't have the whole internet. Many of those sites still had many, many more users and unique daily users on their websites than Facebook did. But we were, you know, growing rapidly, very confident. We said, instead of making them come to the Facebook platform within Facebook, how could we bring the best of the Facebook platform out to them and make Facebook a router where their content kind of goes through Facebook and pushes users back out to their original content? And at that time, we looked, and Google was the #1 traffic source for pretty much every site on the internet.
Through search,
It was all through search, which is, can you just pipe into the intent? Google's capturing all the intent of what people are looking for. Can you pipe in and get traffic to you? And we said, can we get Facebook to at least become #2? For a lot of these sites by making them depend on social in the same way that they learned to depend on search. And so with that, we kind of got the genesis for how do we take the Facebook platform out to the rest of the world.
Now, are you talking about login here, or are you talking about the little widgets that, you know, show you pictures saying, here are the friends of yours that like us on Facebook, why don't you like us too?
We started with the core of the platform. We talked about the login button. We talked about pulling data from Facebook to help those developers or those websites make their sites more social. We didn't think that by starting with a couple of widgets, we were really going to get them to adopt and integrate Facebook in a meaningful way. And we also didn't quite know what widgets would make sense. The like button, when I joined the company, the like button wasn't even quite on Facebook yet. Right? And so it took a while for the like button to now be so profound that you could bring the like button. So we really thought that, how do we take the best of Facebook platform, which, if you remember back in those early days, you actually had to build an application. You actually had to build a website and an experience that lived within Facebook that was social, where the user was logged in with their identity, you could access all their friends, and as they did things, you could share those back out through Facebook in a meaningful way. And we just said, instead of going to a Canvas page on Facebook, how can we make you have the exact same experience on other websites?
Okay, so let's talk about this definition of the term platform, because as you know, it's a term that's widely used and even abused in marketing terms, right? Everything wants to be a platform. How do you think of that, and how was Facebook thinking of what it means to be a platform?
I don't even know that we spent that much time debating what a platform was at the meta level. We just kind of were building our platform. But the way I like to think of platforms is it's a system or a service that already has a lot of users using it, that you can basically build things that leverage the fact that users are using the original platform, and you can build on top of it. So let me try to say that more simply. Any system that has a very large user base that wants to allow other people to provide features to that user base.
Okay.
So you think of Apple as a platform, they have a bunch of people who buy iPhones. They're a platform because they realize that in order to provide the exact right feature for every single person in the world to get the most out of it, they're never going to be able to build all million products or apps. But by opening up a platform, they can prevent every single one of those developers from having to try to build their own phone, because those developers can just use the fact that Apple platform's already done a bunch of the hard work,
right,
and then build on top of it to try to reach users and to try to reach their users, and then they're very happy if more people buy iPhones because they can reach those products on their apps.
So this is interesting because it sounds like Facebook did an unusual kind of twist on that, because one of the reasons why you wanted to build Facebook Connect was that Facebook was actually at the time not a gigantic platform. I mean, it was pretty big in 2008 already, but wasn't gigantic to the sense that, you know, something like the New York Times or Yahoo or somebody would have to take it seriously, right?
It was already big enough to be taken seriously.
But you're saying, like, rather than make everybody come into the platform, you were actually extending the platform out to their sites, right?
But I should say we didn't really build it to grow Facebook. We had confidence.
It wasn't a growth
We had
strategy.
confidence that Facebook was going to grow. There was a great growth team at Facebook that was investing in Facebook's growth very, very seriously. We believed that if you were a user of Facebook, you know, we'd already made photos so much better. There were more photos uploaded to Facebook than any other site, even other sites that had much richer photos experiences because they were social.
Right.
And we believed that news could be more social. If you went to a news site where your friends were commenting on or recommending the news, that could be better. We thought shopping could be more social. So we really said, if you're already using Facebook, we can do two things. We can make your experience around the rest of the web better, and that will make Facebook better because we'll have more interesting content flowing through Facebook.
Okay.
And if we can get that content of what you're doing as a user on other sites flowing through Facebook, it's more interesting for your friends to read what's going on in the world, what your friends are up to. So if we can make the news feed richer because you wrote a review on Yelp, you should share that with your friends on Facebook. We can tighten all those loops. So we can make Yelp a better review site, and if you're a Facebook user, you'll be happy to use your Facebook identity elsewhere.
Okay.
And it will make our news feed better.
Now I want to ask you, because you worked at Twitter as well as Facebook, can you talk about the differences in those two companies' strategies as it applies to, you know, thinking of themselves as platforms?
When I joined Twitter fall of 2009, there was 80-some people in the company. I actually started up the user growth team and did that, and I actually didn't work on the platform. At Twitter, the platform had already launched, but the platform at Twitter was a little bit different. It was an API that lets you access everything that was used to create Twitter. When you give people an API, they will basically do what the API allows them to do. So if you give someone an API to recreate Twitter, a bunch of developers tried to recreate Twitter.
Which is what they went and did. They made Twitter clients. And so
there are a bunch of Twitter clients, but what a lot of really interesting developers did is they figured out how to make tools that made Twitter better. They figured out how to make listening tools, because Twitter was so focused, we're so focused on just building out the consumer product, getting more users, making the core infrastructure actually work, that we weren't building tools for every brand or every agency or everything else. So it was really exciting to see some people come in and say, well, I can take these parts of Twitter and build something that works really, really well for this niche audience that will spend a lot of time or a lot of money. Companies like Hootsuite, that's still around, they built one of the most social media engines. There are companies like Radian6 that figured out how to listen to what was happening on Twitter and be able to alert companies what was happening kind of on the brands and everything else. So while a lot of the discussion was about the Twitter clients, I think that was actually a very small percentage of the overall investment around Twitter. It's just what made most of the headlines. But I think because Facebook, we never really opened up APIs that let you just build a different newsfeed reader. They opened up a little bit in 2009 when we called it our open feed API. I forget what that announcement was, and I don't even know if those APIs are still available in that same way.
Okay.
But from the very early days of Facebook's platform, it was never about rebuild Facebook. It was about take the best parts of Facebook to build your own experience and push more content to Facebook. And Twitter's was that plus just being totally open. So the headlines were about people creating clients. But the reality, if you look back at the history of Twitter platform, there are several billion-dollar companies or billions of dollars of exits because of people who built things for brands on listening, brands on building better tool sets, who built very custom experiences where their sites were enhanced by the power of Twitter or being able to sign in with Twitter that had nothing to do with trying to replicate a Twitter client.
See, that's interesting, because I think if you were to talk to developers, I think the general impression would be that Facebook is a much more developer-friendly company than Twitter, because Twitter has had this history of kind of, pulling the rug out from under people a little bit when it decided like, oh, we've gone a little bit too far. But you're saying that maybe it got in that position because it was actually more open and provided more access to its fundamental APIs than Facebook did.
There's always a little bit of nuance here. Like I'm laughing at you saying people see Twitter as more developer friendly, because if you'd asked me in 2008, when we were changing Facebook around in very meaningful ways, we were deprecating some of the Canvas page work, we were focusing more on Connect, we were changing some of the rules about how aggressively you could have your users, invest. The developer ecosystem that had so quickly developed around Facebook hated Facebook, and they were cabals that were having secret meetings to try to disrupt Facebook. Because let's step back a second. These are two of the fastest growing consumer platforms that have just happened over the past decade. I mean, Google obviously being one of the other ones, iOS and Android. But Facebook and Twitter both grew so fast in users that everybody wanted to access them, and yet both companies were developing and changing themselves. They were figuring out their business model, they were figuring out their place in the world, they were figuring out how they had to keep reinventing themselves. I mean, one of the powers of Facebook is that it reinvents itself every year in a meaningful way. It's the news feed changes in meaningful ways, the type of content that shows up. More things are showing up music related or video related, and as that ecosystem keeps changing, Facebook has to keep changing to keep up. Same with Twitter. So as both of these companies were finding their business models, they were so open to developers that when they made a change to make the product better, it often meant, well, developers were depending on thing A, that got lost because thing B was more important. But from Facebook or Twitter's perspective, the singular goal was grow the company to a place that even more users would get value and even more developers would get value. And if you look at the history of either company going from tens of millions of active users now to hundreds, both of them have just done so tremendously there that some of the fact that it had to keep changing along the way is just part of the rolling with it. I get a company like Instagram that was using Facebook and Twitter to push out images in the early days and figure out how to build a very important independent network. Pinterest found a lot of leverage from using Facebook in early days, able to share pins and turned it into a very important network. So there's plenty of companies that were able to do that, but there's plenty more that got big quick, and then as stuff changed, the thing that made them get big wasn't as sustainable into their own independence.
Are there some trade-offs to taking a platform route or trying to build a platform? I mean, you named two companies just now that have gotten quite big using other platforms, but have not themselves really turned into platforms, right? Instagram is still fairly closed and insular. Pinterest, similarly. You can look at some other giant companies like Uber that aren't platforms at all, really. Is there some reason that entrepreneurs today might be reluctant to build a platform?
It's a good question. Uber is actually experimenting with the platform. I see it in Google Maps. I see it in some calendar apps. Like I see some places where they're doing neat things to at least expose their data via an API, but I wouldn't call it a platform. I think it's scary. I think if you're trying to build one of the biggest, most important companies of the next decade, you need to be not just a place with a ton of users, but a place that users and the entire kind of internet ecosystem start to depend on. And I think figuring out how to open up to whatever ecosystem you want to be a part of, I think is very, very important. Snapchat, you could call it a bit of a platform with its Discover tab and the way that media companies are using it. And they're basically saying the media ecosystem should become part of Snapchat. And we want to embrace that. And I'm ambitious in my own head for what Snapchat can actually evolve to have even more things and people depend on that. And so I do think it's important, but I think it's not something, I think what the Facebook and Twitter lessons showed is it can be also somewhat challenging for a company to open up and let a lot of people on, and then realize as a company you have to shift and you have to break a lot of relationships or break a lot of expectations as you shift as a company to get to something that's even more sustainable. So by not going down the platform route early, there's some change. But would Facebook be in the place it is without its platform? I don't know. I don't really think so. Twitter, it's a very healthy debate. Would Twitter have done better not being so open early? It's an open question. We can't go back and change it, but I think a lot of the enthusiasm around Twitter in the early days of different apps that did different things let the power users really explore Twitter in a way that helped make it really powerful in those early days. That I'm not sure if Twitter had been totally closed and didn't have the extra overhead of the platform, I'm not sure it would have been quite as successful.
Right. So can I ask you another question about Twitter? Sort of in this transition phase right now, like Dick Costolo has recently left and Jack Dorsey is back. You overlapped with him a little bit, I think. The last time he returned was sort of the tail end of your stint at Twitter. Twitter as a company, sort of a lot of people are thinking like, God, they've really got to do something. They're sort of always a distant number two to Facebook, right? They've really got to do something to sort of kick it into gear and show some returns and some profits for investors and really like figure out what it is they want to be. What do you think Twitter needs right now?
Well, Stefan, I think this comparison of Twitter to Facebook is somewhat misguided. I think they're such fundamentally different products.
They are. That's fair.
Like the power of Facebook is you see a whole bunch of people in the world who you know, and Facebook says, do you know this person? When you sign up, it's like, who do you know? Do you know this person? Do you know this person? And you're saying yes or no, do I know this person? Once I've established a Facebook who I know, Facebook gives me amazing content from those people. And what's powerful about that content is it's from those people. And if you, Dylan, are posting a picture of your kid on a beach, I like that just because it's your kid running around the beach that you're sharing.
And you know the kid.
And I know
that's right.
the kid, and I know you, and I'm happy for that moment that you're having, and I feel a little bit more connected to you. But if I just saw a random kid on the beach, it's a random kid on the beach, it's not as interesting.
Right.
Okay? So that's what Facebook's about. And Facebook just does an incredible job with it, and it figured out how when you share an article or share a video or you like something, all of that is relevant to me, and it's partially relevant to me because it's interesting. It's partially relevant to me because there's a personal connection. The power of Twitter is different. On Twitter, the people who get Twitter and use Twitter and love Twitter have invested too much time. It still takes too much time.
Yeah.
But they've invested a lot of time in getting a news feed that is tuned to whenever you, I call it turn on Twitter. You open up Twitter, you start reading. If you've tuned your Twitter right, and you've tuned into who you really like, it's amazing every time. You just know what's going on in the world.
Yeah.
And it's not about your kid on the beach. It's not about the personal connection you have with most of the people there, although it is with some. But it's about this information that's just pumped at you in a very visceral, powerful way. I think the hard part is it's very hard to get that set up, and I don't think it's amazing that 300 million some people have done it. And I think it's very hard to get the next billion people in the world to do it without Twitter making it a lot easier. And I don't think, from the time I joined the company to when I left, we started making it easier step by step. We, did a lot of things to do it, but it was the very beginning of a long journey. And I don't know that it's gotten enough easier yet to be as mainstream as I think it should. But I'm very confident that Twitter should be a billion user product or more. It's just a matter of how do we get each person to a Twitter timeline that is right for them, because all the information's there. If you care about a certain sports team or you care about a certain niche hobby interest, there are experts on there talking about it like every day.
Right.
But Twitter has to make it so much easier for you to express those interests and start getting that content in your timeline that it works.
Okay. Well, I think we're just about out of time, and I want to keep you on your schedule, so we'll wrap it up there. And I just want to say thanks again, Josh, for joining us on What to Think. It's been a pleasure talking with you.
Thanks so much for having me.
You've been listening to What to Think, VentureBeat's technology news podcast. As always, you can find us online at VentureBeat.com, and you can listen to us in iTunes, and if you haven't already done so, please subscribe to us. Just go on over to iTunes and search for What to Think. So until next time, I'm Dylan Sweeney.
I'm Jordan Ovett.
Be well, and we'll catch you next time.
Bye.